Steve Martin usually introduces this song by saying that he was annoyed that religious people get all the good songs and atheists don't really have anything. So this is called Atheists Don't Have No Songs, which we all learned this morning. So thank you to this small group of Unity singers that came in today and learned it with me. And I forgot my pitch. So, oh, there it is.
Christians have the hymns and pages, Harmony be love for the Jews, Baptists have the rock of ages, atheists sing the blues, romantics play Claire de Lune, born again sing He is risen, but no one for godless existentialism.
For atheists, there's no good news, they'll never sing
a song of faith.
In their songs they have a rule,
but He is always lowercase. But He is always lowercase. Some folks sing a Bach cantata. Lutherans sing Christmas trees. Atheist songs add up to nada. But they do have Sundays free. Pentecostals sing to heaven. Coptics have the Book of Scrolls. Numerologists count to 7.
5, 6, 7.
Atheists have rock and roll.
For atheists, there's no good news, they'll never sing
a song of faith.
In their songs they have a rule,
but He is always lowercase. But He is always lowercase. Atheists
don't have no song.
Christians have their hymns and pages. Harmony be love for the Jews. Baptists have the rock of ages. Atheists just sing the blues.
Catholics dress up for Mass and listen to
Gregorian chants.
Atheists just take a pass,
Watch football in their underpants. Watch football in their underpants. Atheists
don't have no song.
don't have no
Good morning, everyone here in the sanctuary and those who are joining us online this morning, and welcome to Unity Church-Unitarian. My name is Merrill Aldrich, and I'm a congregant here at Unity. And with me this morning is worship associate Lorelee Wederstrom. It's so good to be with you this morning. We welcome your gifts and your wounds, and occasionally your sense of humor.
Good morning. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. As philosopher and poet Mark Nepo writes, so much depends on the drumming of the soul that opens the heart, the quieting of mind that opens the eye, the acceptance of others that softens the truth. We then light this beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Please remain standing and join me in the responsive reading number 547, found in the back of your gray hymnal. Now blows the wind with soft, relaxing warmth. Children swarm in the playgrounds and on the streets, and eager city folk, vacation-bound, crowd the broad highways. The lakes and seashores lose their solitude, and all the world seems turned to turmoil. What of ourselves? There could be now deep peace, a time for soul searching. We might turn to examine our own lives, to sort and grow our tendencies of thought, to sift the true from false in the things of doubt. The beautiful from ugliness unmarked. The sun beats down. It's time for pause. Even the trees seem resting for a time, as if to meditate and gather strength for the more strenuous times that lie ahead. And shall not we? Here's the unfinished clay, half molded, that still waits on us. To think of what we have been, as we are, still ready to come. Please be seated.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children. With those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses, seen and unseen, with mental disability and addiction, We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. We pray for those facing the ends of their lives and for the people of this courageous congregation as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. Will you pray with me for all these we now name? Cynthia and Michael Orange are happy to be celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary and the anniversary of when they met at the top of the Empire State Building 55 years ago. However, instead of gold for this anniversary, they gave each other 2 bright pink lines on COVID tests, so had to put their celebrations on hold while they isolate together. We hold in care those parents who are preparing to send young ones to college next month or out into the world, and those young ones who are leaving. I want to acknowledge the loss of a popular icon this week. She once said, quote, "They wanted me to grow the hair long, wear short skirts and high heels, and write songs that wouldn't challenge anything. But then I come from a country where there used to be riots in the streets over plays. That's what art is for." Many of us came to know her as a truth-telling elfin singer with a shaved head and combat boots who called out the Catholic Church on national television. Farewell, Sinead O'Connor. And as we mark the end of this, the hottest month ever recorded, we hold both the victims and perpetrators of climate change, which ultimately is all of us. I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like this community to hold this morning. Divine spark that lives in each of us, on this beautiful high summer day, help us to connect to one another and to our lives. You so often know what is right and what is true, even when our desires or our grief or our fear pull us this way or that. Help us to discover and to deepen an abundant life of the Spirit, a life of love and of witness overflowing. Amen.
The Heart is Still Our Teacher by Mark Nepo. The old world is gone, and still one candle can light many if we work with what we're given in resisting the suffering and not suffering. The daily work is to remember that you can't fly with one wing. During adversity, we finally accept that our kinship is to meet below all names. No matter how we stray, we are taught by the rush of life that, in the thick of it, we are always moving toward a greater sense of living. It is the blessing of the ordinary that awakens us to everything.
Today, if you'll join me, we're going on a bit of a journey from some high theological ideas all the way down through the clouds, past the rooftops, and on to a waiting couch with a cat. On the way, we'll very briefly meet a number of brilliant folks from different disciplines, possibly too many, but please bear with me. So, part one of this is called What's the Big Thing? A disproportionate number of my friends and acquaintances outside these walls are atheists, agnostics, or, at a minimum, skeptics. They share that familiar suspicion of being made to proclaim something that they don't believe. Should we land on the topic of church in our conversations, they ask me these questions, sometimes one eyebrow cocked, or sometimes with genuine curiosity. What do they believe these Unitarian, universal, what is it called? What is their message? What do they make you say? What is the big thing? And all I can answer is, well, it's complicated. Could you bear an hour listening to me describe the entwined histories of Unitarianism, Universalism, and Transcendentalism? Probably not. But it is fascinating to me, this creedless religion. At the beginning, to be frank, I struggled with the apparent contradiction of honoring so many of the world's faith traditions, which seem to have deep contradictions and sometimes irreconcilable differences. 10 years ago, long before I had set foot at Unity Church, the president and founder of the organization Interfaith America, Ibu Patel, delivered a fantastic Ware lecture at our annual UU General Assembly. He had already done a tremendous amount of work on interfaith cooperation, and he had published a book with our own Beacon Press. Though he proclaimed his affection for UUs in the talk to loud cheers, as a Muslim, he was careful to say two things. One, there is great power in being able to articulate, to speak your faith. It's important, and it's worth it. And two, while we have common cause sometimes, and it's important, using his term, to look for the resonances, there are differences, and important differences. He says these are not minor or trivial differences. We may sometimes imagine the differences are minor, but the people of other faiths often won't share that point of view. I too have personally felt the need to really wrangle with this problem. How is it exactly that our faith can claim that all these different religious traditions, and even no religious tradition, contain truth without becoming ensnared by the ways they contradict one another? How can we avoid the dangerous minefield also that is the statement, underneath, we are all really the same? One clue, as I joined this community and spent time learning our history and in teaching junior high religious education and meeting in other small group settings, I noticed a shift in the meanings we associate with the terms Unitarian and Universalist. I promise I won't spend an hour here, but we have to take just a short detour and talk about the origins of those terms. So, Unitarian and Universalist. Historically, both these terms come from specific Christian traditions. Both are fairly abstract or high theological positions. Unitarian meant, or perhaps means, the assertion that within Christian religious traditions, God is not a three-part being, God, Jesus, and Holy Ghost, but a single unity. Versions of this argument go far back in European Christianity, including the First Council of Nicaea in 325, around the teachings of Arius, and later in writings of people like Martin Celerius and Michael Servetus in the 1500s. The established church took these ideas very seriously indeed. There was a time that on a good day, disagreement might mean you were simply banished. On a bad day, you'd be burned at the stake. Our other U, universalism, is also historically a Christian idea involving debates about the afterlife, whether punishment might be eternal and whether hell exists, and so on. Central to universalism is the idea of universal salvation, that all souls will ultimately be saved. And the combination Unitarian Universalism was created by the merger of two American, historically parallel but separate Christian denominations, the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association. But this is the part that fascinates me. As my relationship with this community has deepened, and I've learned more through the Teaching Associates program and in small group ministry, and again, from the junior high kids, the in-flight current meaning of these terms seems to have changed dramatically. Many people I've talked to take the roots of the words, unity from Unitarian and universal from universalism, and pivot them to new meanings. Unity is no longer the counterpoint to the Trinity, but is a term to evoke something like the cooperation of people or the commonality of human experience. Universal no longer relates literally to salvation for them, but instead maybe describes how universal truths are available to us through the lens of different faith traditions, or the universal worth and dignity of every person. It is as if we teach the vestigial meaning of the terms as a part of our history, but we have redefined them entirely out of that history. I've had the experience where people who have been in the UU tradition far longer than I have were flabbergasted to hear where these words came from. But language changes, and that's not only okay, that's part of its magic. I have no problem with saying Unitarian Universalism might point to some more specific and universal truths about being a human. That's part of this idea of the small t truth. On the inversion of the big and the small questions, I've been in many conversations at the church now for 6 or 7 years, often the smaller ones, the chalice circles, the UU Wellspring evenings. A refrain I keep picking up goes like this: the big ideas this year or month or week or evening were interesting, but what really got me was the relationships, the listening, the mutual support. As if there were some primacy to the big ideas, and the community were just a secondary, maybe even surprising side benefit. In the same way, some of the skeptical friends I alluded to earlier will also say, well, I suppose you get a community of people at the church too. Dr. Martha Nussbaum is a teacher, a philosopher, and an author. And if you don't know her work, listen to this resume. She is a professor at the University of Chicago in law, ethics, philosophy, and an associate in the classics department, and the divinity school, and the political science department. And she's written something like 27 books. She became a minor celebrity in the late 1980s after the publication of her book, The Fragility of Goodness, Luck and Ethics in Greek Tragedy and Philosophy. But the reason for her celebrity was that she was absolutely insistent about forging a relationship between philosophy, story, and our real experience, coming down from the clouds, if you will. In an interview in November of 1988, she put it this way. Bill Moyers asked, "The common perception of philosophy is of a thinker of abstract thoughts, but stories and myths are very important to you as a philosopher, aren't they?" And she replied, "They're very important, because I think that the language of philosophy has to come back from the abstract heights on which it so often lives to the richness of everyday discourse and everyday humanity. And it has to listen to the ways that people talk about themselves, talk about what matters to them in human life," end quote. In that first book, she talked about Greek tragedy, which might seem incredibly esoteric, but she did it in ways that are vividly immediate to our lives, our experiences, and our choices. It's the specificity of real life, of our everyday encounters, that makes this meaningful. So, way up in the rarefied clouds of ancient Greek tragedy, we have Hecuba, Queen of Troy. Hecuba is one of the most bleak and despairing characters in all of Greek mythology, having her husband and many of her children murdered in the wars, and from queen becoming a slave, and she ultimately snaps and takes revenge on a bunch of people. She is like the personification of the worry, I could lose everything. But Nussbaum brings an essential truth to our everyday experience from the myth. She says, quote, "To be a good human is to have a kind of openness to the world, an ability to trust uncertain things beyond our own control that can lead you to be shattered in very extreme circumstances for which you are not yourself to blame." Or about the Greek leader Agamemnon, who faced the impossible choice of sacrificing either his daughter or his entire fleet. She says, "Tragedy happens only when you are trying to live well. Because for a heedless person who doesn't have deep commitments to others, Agamemnon's conflict wouldn't be a tragedy. Somebody who's a bad person would or could go in and slaughter that child with equanimity, or could desert all the men and women and let them die. But it's when you're trying to live well and you deeply care about the things you're trying to do that the world enters in a particularly painful way," end quote. In some way, what she's doing is also inverting these big and small questions for me. It's not whether the pantheon of Greek gods is a correct theology. It's what happens when this person, metaphorically, faces an impossible choice, as we all will do at one time or another. It's about connecting these stories to our own in a very real in a very intimate way. So to return to this question of our church conversations, what if we didn't almost sheepishly say, the big ideas were nice, but what really got me was the mutual support? What really got me was the shared stories. What really got me was the love in the room. What if instead we proclaim those small things to be the big things? And the last piece of this, on the importance of the here and now. As Unitarian Universalists, one thing most of us share is a focus on this life, here, now, today. And not only that what we do in this life is important, but that it is life's finitude that paradoxically makes it matter. The fact we are impermanent is one of the key things that makes us human and makes what we do meaningful. There are variations on that insight from all over. For example, at the core of many Buddhist teachings is this struggle between our human longing for permanence, our ego-driven desire to live on, and the reality that everything is temporary. They teach that even though it can be a source of fear or suffering, the temporal nature of our lives is one of the defining features of being human. And along the same line, in the poem Summer Day, the poet Mary Oliver famously asks, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And even in the song, If We Were Vampires, singer of sad songs, Jason Isbell tells his beloved, "If we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke and laugh at all the lovers and their plans. I wouldn't feel the need to hold your hand." So, how long do we have, do you suppose? The answer, on average, is in the title of a book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. Mr. Burkeman is a self-proclaimed reformed productivity geek. He spent a large portion of his life interested in productivity and read almost every available self-help book on the topic to master his own time. He describes this ever-accelerating quest to answer every email and finish every work task and every life commitment in a sort of ever-ascending ramp of busyness. After either an epiphany or a breakdown about this, his book, ironically, ends up being a sort of anti-productivity self-help book. He dives deeply into how we spend our time, which, as it turns out, is largely a theological question if we are in anything but desperate circumstances. The issues, ultimately and inevitably, turn on the question of why. Why we make the choices we make leads to those choices themselves, which then become our time, and our time becomes our lives. So this passage in particular really got me. He writes, "All of this illustrates what might be termed the paradox of limitation, which runs through everything that follows. The more you try to manage your time with the goal of achieving a feeling of total control and freedom from the inevitable constraints of being human, the more stressful, empty, and frustrating life gets." He goes on, in practical terms, a limit-embracing attitude to time means organizing your days with the understanding that you definitely won't have time for everything that you want to do, or that other people want you to do. And so, at the very least, you can stop berating yourself for failing. He continues, since hard choices are unavoidable, what matters is learning to make them consciously, deciding what to focus on and what to neglect, rather than letting them get made by default or deceiving yourself that with enough hard work and the right time management tricks, you might not have to make them at all. It also means resisting the seductive temptation to always keep your options open, which is really just another way of trying to feel in control, in favor of making deliberately big, daunting, irreversible commitments, which you can't know in advance will turn out for the best, but which will reliably prove more fulfilling in the end. End quote. This is quite a statement for a productivity expert. You simply won't get it all done isn't in much of the traditional literature in this area. But to try to answer this question of limitation, the book has a surprising number of religious references. To choose how we spend our lives and then to choose to experience them fully requires a spiritual presence and outlook and a quality of attention that is most often addressed or cultivated in theological terms. So, maybe you are stuck on the couch because there's a cat in your lap. Maybe it's the first day the dog you adopted is seeing his new home. Maybe you're waiting for your parole decision. Maybe you're singing in harmony with strangers. Maybe you've made it another day without a drink. Maybe you didn't get the job, and now you don't know what to do. Or maybe you got the job, and now you don't know what to do. Maybe it's a long, perfect, cool northern summer twilight with friends on the patio. Maybe you're buckling your baby into the car seat for the very first time. Perhaps you're floating in the ocean. Maybe you're helping your daughter practice hockey shots in the alley on a summer day. Maybe you're walking down the jetway, leaving your family behind to travel to a faraway country. Maybe you're thinking about marrying someone. Maybe you've had a fight with your in-laws about Fox News. Maybe you've gone into a funeral with a heart so broken you wondered how you'd ever make it out the other side. Maybe you've eaten an ugly, perfect tomato that by some miracle a plant delivered into your hands. Perhaps you were displaced from your home by the construction of a freeway. Maybe you've come home from a 14-hour shift at the hospital or the hotel or the Amazon warehouse, so tired you can't believe you're still standing. Maybe you just played the most transcendent saxophone solo over Wayne Shorter's tune Footprints, and the rhythm section had the deepest pocket. Maybe for years, you've wondered if you can forgive a parent. Maybe you've experienced that liminal space visiting someone in the hospital who has a grave illness. If you are open to it, it may be that these experiences connect you with your spirit and illuminate a manifold sort of truth that I'm calling the little t truth. Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs introduced me to the most relevant piece of theology here, and it fits on one line from Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. Maybe our lives together are the most important thing. This is my theology. This is my truth. The ordinary things are extraordinary, and the small things are really the big things. May it be so.
Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. The larger portion of our offering today will be shared with Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop fosters literacy, community, and devotion to art inside Minnesota correctional institutions. As part of this deeply rehabilitative process, students tell their own stories and challenge stereotypes about incarcerated populations. Because during the pandemic, all in-person programming was suspended, this collection will support the resumption of 25 in-person classes for the summer and fall 2023. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community.
So, if you're visiting with us today, or you're new to the congregation, we invite you to fill out one of the visitor cards, either here in the pews, or if you're online, there's a visitor form link in the description box below the YouTube video. Lorelee and I look forward to greeting you in the lobby after the service. And please join us for tea or coffee and connecting with friends in the parish hall just beyond. If you'd like more in-depth information about Unity Church, we offer a rotating Finding Yourself at Unity class each Sunday. Today we will offer a building tour of this much-loved old facility. The tour will begin at 11:15 in the Gannett Room, which is located at the very farthest end of the second floor. There may be some irony in having to find your way all the way back there before the building tour, but I'm sure anyone here will be happy to help, and you could make a friend. Newsflash, we are thrilled to report a very successful garage sale fundraiser. The numbers of donations exceeded our expectations, and our staff and many volunteers, thank you, sorted, priced, and sold the abundance of items. That means hundreds of thousands of items over the last 3 days. Our goal was $10,000, and we made it. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who participated, and you will notice or possibly even trip over the leftovers. So please explore the parish hall and lobby at the service, well, after the service, and find treasures and take them home with you, and even possibly make a donation if you want. Finally, Unity's board has extended the deadline to apply to serve as a trustee to August 13th. The board is moving into some very exciting work in the next few years, including renewing the congregation's end statements and welcoming and getting to know a new minister. We hope you will take the time to seriously consider this opportunity for shared ministry. Details, including how to apply, are in this week at Unity, the insert in your order of service. Our closing hymn is Turn the World Around, number 1074 in the teal hymnal. Please rise in body or spirit as you are able.
Quick word about the closing hymn. This is one of those songs that everyone knows in a different version, and none of those versions matches what's in the hymnal. So we're going to do it the way it's in the hymnal, but what I recommend is this song repeats a lot. Just sing something, and it'll sound good, and you can't really do it wrong.
Friends, as you move out into the world this morning, may you connect your encounters and your experience to your spirit. After all, it is the blessing of the ordinary that awakens us to everything. This is the time that we have. This is the life that we have together. May it be so.